Hi everyone, this is Ivan from Skills Build Training. This channel is all about showing you how to become a highly paid IT pro fast. In today's video, I'm going to show you more features and important skills in Microsoft Azure. Thank you for choosing to watch. To help us help more people like you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell so that you'll get notified of our future videos. So let's get started. In part 1, we went over the basics of cloud architecture, important concepts, and learned how to create a basic network in Azure. In this video, we're going to continue to build on these fundamental skills. One thing you'll always be asked is how much will it cost? Azure provides some great tools to help you answer this question. We will also touch on an important advantage of using the cloud that has become known as DevOps. Azure pipelines are a collection of services and tools that make it easier for application developers to turn their code into a deliverable product with quick updates and quality control. Finally, we'll get hands-on with Azure Active Directory and understand the very important topic of identity management. Whenever you start working on a project that's going to be based in the cloud, the first question you're always going to be asked is how much will it cost? Well, luckily, Azure makes it very simple to figure this out. The first tool that they have to do this is called the pricing calculator. With this, you can actually make an inventory of all the resources you plan on using, or at least the ones you're going to get started with, and it will give you the options to say exactly what size the disks are going to be, how many processors, what kind of redundancy you need, all of that. And it will actually give you an estimate on how much that's going to cost you per month. It's great for your project proposals because then you can go into, whoever your client is or your management, and you can give them a straight, figure. You can make reports and show them exactly how much the usage of Azure will cost them. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how the pricing calculator works in Azure. As you can see, you're going to find it on the azure.microsoft.com site itself, not from the Azure portal. So it's really cool actually. What you can do is you get to choose whatever services you might be thinking of using. So as you can see, it's not just their basic virtual machines. You can do it for anything. You can go to containers if you're doing an AI or machine learning project, DevOps, which we'll get into, mixed reality, blockchain, whatever you can think of, they'll help you figure out how much it's going to cost. Now, the assets that we've created so far mainly have been virtual machines. So let's see how that works. So we come in here and we choose virtual machine, and then it adds a virtual machine to our estimate. And as you saw, there is a little notification down there that one had been added. So you get to choose what region it's in. Now, the good thing about being able to choose regions, by the way, is that in traditional networks, all your stuff is on premises. It's in one place. If you lose power, if there's a fire or a flood, a natural disaster of some sort, you're down, you're out. But one of the nice things about cloud deployments is you can put them in multiple geographical regions. So let's say we put one in the western United States, but you can then put another one in the east. So you have a west coast and an east coast, and it provides a nice backup that way. Other use cases I've actually participated in was we were doing a security project where we put honeypots that attackers would think were real servers to attack, and we put them in Germany just because we wanted to see if we had systems in Europe, who would attack them and in what ways that would be different from the United States. So that's another fun thing you can do if you're doing research projects. But for our purposes, I'm on the west coast of the United States, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it there. As you can see, you can choose the operating system. You can set it as either Linux or Windows as your main type. And for here, obviously, you have the OS, if it's their SQL server. For Linux, you have all the wonderful different distributions to choose from. We'll keep it Ubuntu. We'll go ahead and look at a Linux server just because those are fun. Tier, you got your basic, your low priority, your standard, and those just have to do with, you know, how good is the virtual machine? Is it going to be availability? Those kind of things. Now, here's where the big differences come on price: is what type of instance is it going to be? And this is where you get into how many virtual processors it will have, the RAM, the storage, that kind of thing. As you can see by default, it was on their D2 size and in the version 3. So by default, whenever you go to create a virtual machine, for the most part, it's going to be set up to have two virtual CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, and then it'll have 50 gigabytes of temporary storage. As you can see right off the bat, they'll give you the per hour in U.S. currency, which usually comes out to some sort of cents per hour. And that's what gets difficult when you're trying to tell people what the budget's going to be, because if you're telling them cents per hour, it's hard to put your head around that. They also have the different tiers of subscription. Um, Pay as you go, meaning you only pay for what you're using at any time. You can actually do reserved. So if you know that this server is going to be running for a year or 3 years or more, you can pay for it up front. And you do get significant discounts if you do that. So if you know that you're going to be running resources for a year or more, it's definitely worthwhile to do that if you have the money, because you have to pay it up front. So it's easier. Let's say if you're just doing research, or you're an education institution that's training, sometimes to pay as you go. Okay, so as you can see, it beautifully gives me the average per month, which is $85.41 for this particular instance, with no upfront cost. Now if I change this, then it's going to give me different amounts. As you can see, it's going to change that, because you're going to be paying less because you're reserving it. Now we can make other changes. Let's say that we don't need 8 gigs of RAM. Let's say it's something smaller, and we can do something smaller. So we can come in here and go to some of their smaller instances, like an A1. So as you can see, it's just a single core with about 2 gigabytes of RAM and 70 gigabytes of temporary storage. So a hard drive, basically. And as you can see, it's only 6 cents an hour. So if you run that for a whole month, then it's pretty much going to come down to $43. Now notice you can also set whatever time you're thinking of. By the way, 730 hours is a full month of operation. So you can change this. So if you know that you're only going to be running it like so many days a week, or so many hours a day kind of thing, then you can change that and get a better estimate. You could just scale this up. Like let's say we're getting 5 of these things. We could just do that. Now, just to let you know, this size is pretty much the same as, say, like a Pi Raspberry. So, for certain things it's okay, but not for others. But the cool thing is that these things can get as big as you need or as small as you need. Like for instance, you can go all the way up to their G5, which is some of their largest machines instances, and you have 32 cores, 448 gigabytes of RAM, and then 6 terabytes of storage, which comes out to about $9 an hour. So in a month, that's going to add up. Obviously, most even companies aren't going to need this, but it's there if you want it. So let's go back to the D2. Yeah, we'll go back to which one were we on? This one. We'll go back to this one. 2 cores, 7 gigs. Okay. going to be, about 15 cents an hour, which is going to come out to about 562 a month. Actually, we're gonna go a little smaller than that even. Um, let's see. Let's find something smaller. Here, we'll scale that down. So here we got 2 cores, and then only about a little less than 4 gigs of RAM and 135 gigabytes temporary storage. I mean, oh, I know why it's coming out so much. It's because we have 5 instances. That's why it was looking odd to me. Okay, so yeah, we're back down. Now let's see what happens if we change this to Windows. As you can see, Windows is a little more expensive. The reason, if you're going to run Windows, you also have to pay for the license. But they tell you that. They say license included, and then you're going to be paying a little more. Now, if you were running a hybrid cloud system, then that goes down because you already own those licenses. And then, of course, you can see how it's going to be if you go reserve, that kind of thing. And like I said, you can do this not just for virtual machines, but anything that you're doing. If you're doing scale sets, where you can basically, a scale set, by the way, is you designate a type of virtual machine, the size, the setup, and then you use multiple instances of that same virtual machine to make up for heavier traffic. So you can take different loads of traffic at different times. That's what a scale set is. But yeah, so we could come in here and we can find out, like, okay, let's get rid of some of these first of all. So yeah, you can delete anything that you add by just going to the little trash can. So like, let's see how much it's going to be if we want a VPN gateway. Okay, so I'm going to put it back in US. Actually, you know what? Let's be different, just to be different. I like the UK, so I watch different shows. So we'll go UK South, and we're going to do a VPN gateway. They got different VPNs that you can use. We're just going to keep it basic. And then we can see that site to site, okay, let's look up, they have up to 10 tunnels for free, so you're not going to pay any extra. And then point to site, you got up to 128 tunnels for free. So you have a lot of access within a free tier, kind of. Now here's the thing though, is they want to know how much we're going to be running this. So if we go back to that 720 hours, and we can put that in, and then they're going to want to know what the outbound VNet data transfer is going to be. But we're not going to do that. We're going to just put back to our VPN gateway type, and then let's put something, it's not going to be a lot usually, so let's put something like 2 gigabytes there. You also can say whether you want support. So let's say we don't, we need some support because we're just a developer team, we don't run network stuff. So you can actually click that and see that it went up a little bit. And then we can also get like an online service agreement. Let's say we want an enterprise agreement. It's going to tell me to choose it. I don't have any available agreements, so on this subscription, so we'll look at that some other time. See, now it's asking me if I want to talk to an agent. Very helpful though. So yeah, it gives you what your estimate is. So as you can see, for any resource, you can just sit here and see how much they cost. It's actually kind of fun. So like in the last video, we put up a Azure Bastion. You can put one of these up and see how much that's going to be costing you. It's very convenient and easy, really easy to use. Just for fun, I love AI and machine learning. We're going to find out. So how much that costs, because I love it. Okay, so we're going to see this Azure machine learning service. We're going to put that in. Okay, so this is their machine learning instance. just as a starter, it's their D3 V2. So it has 4 cores on CPU, has 14 gigabytes of RAM. And then, of course, if you're going to scale that up, kind of thing, then, like for instance, if you're going to go to enterprise, then it's going to get a little more. So, yeah, it's a very useful tool. That way, you can learn more. You can also go to example scenarios, and you can see what different setups look like. One, they actually show you what different cloud architectures look like. But the other thing is, like, let's say where you're thinking of, because our next topic in this video is DevOps. So, like, let's say we're doing DevOps for web apps. We can actually come in here and it will show us. Let me make the screen bigger. It'll show us, well, not that big. It'll show us what the setup's going to be. Okay. Here's your engineer. It's Visual Studio, repos. It shows you the whole setup. But the cool thing is that you can actually add the estimate. And so, let me get back here. If we go back to products, yeah, see, it's actually added that estimate now. And you can make changes to the, whatever the defaults are. But this way, like let's say you don't know a lot about DevOps, but you're like, oh, should I put it on Azure or should I try to, set something up? And you need to make a budget because you've been told, hey, we're going to do DevOps in the cloud, but we need to know what it's going to cost. You can just use this basic template and at least have an idea. You can have an idea of what you might be spending. So it's really convenient tool. I really suggest it in your planning stages. Once you start working in the cloud, the second thing you're always going to be asked is how much are we spending and what budget are you going to need and are you going to exceed that budget? Luckily, Azure got us covered once again using their Azure Cost Management tool. This picture here is a quick demonstration of what the main dashboard looks like. It will actually show you on a graph how much you're actually spending. It will give you a forecast of where you'll be at a certain time of the year. You can set that to different, times, to either a month or maybe 6 months or however long you want to forecast into the future. One of the best features is you can actually create a budget. So you can put the maximum amount of money that you want to spend on this setup. And if certain metrics are showing that you're going to forecast above it, or that you are even spending more at the time than the budget, it will actually send you an alert. So you can get notified of this. This tool is very useful. Again, if you're going to be running a project and you need to make reports, or if, making sure that you don't go over budget and that you really understand what you're paying for. Azure has done a fantastic job at making this easy. The next topic we're going to talk about is really probably one of the best uses of cloud computing, in my opinion, and that is called development operations, also known as DevOps. The key formula for DevOps is what's called CI/CD, also known as continuous integration and continuous development. Now, in Azure, we have something called Azure Pipelines. And Azure Pipelines is how you take a programmer's code and get it into whatever deployment target. So let me give you an example using this wonderful little picture that I got from Azure's documentation. Thank you. And so here's your programmer editing their code on their little keyboard. Okay. And you can set up all the variables for your pipeline in what's called a YAML configuration file. However, you can also do a lot of this on the portal. If you're not comfortable, typing everything out on YAML, some prefer YAML. Typing it out is actually pretty easy. It's just a label and then a keyword. Oh, a keyword and a value, really. A keyword and a value. So that's one way of setting it up. Again, you can actually do a lot of it with the UI in in the Azure portal itself. Now, here is one of the most important parts of DevOps, which is the code repository. So what happens is the programmer can be working anywhere in the world, especially in today's world. We all tend to work remote. So you can edit your code while you're sipping your iced tea on a beach. And then you're going to do what's called pushing the code to your repo, your repository. And so what that's going to do is it's going to make that code available to anybody else on your team. And they can change the code, and it's called version control. So if somebody puts a bug in the software by accident, you can go back to whatever branch of the code was working. It makes it a lot easier for programmers to work on the same project but different parts of it, or at least control it a little better so that you get fewer errors, or if there is an error, you can fix it quicker. Now, like I said, the next step in Azure is what's called an Azure pipeline. And an Azure pipeline is a system that will quickly and efficiently appropriate all the resources you need to make this happen. So let's say we're making a website, right? And it's a basic website. People are going to come and read a blog or something, and we want to code the website ourselves, or it could be anything really. So in the old days, if you wanted to do that, and you wanted to be able to control all of the repository stuff and everything, you would actually have to provision all the resources yourself, right? You'd have to have the web server going, you'd have to set it all up, everything like that. Well, this is something called code as infrastructure. So what you do is beforehand, this is where that YAML file comes in. Beforehand, you tell Azure Pipelines what you're going to need. You can say, I'm going to need a web server. It's going to have to be able to use JavaScript. It might need a database. It might need to use PHP. It might need to use C# for different programming purposes. But Azure Pipelines gets all this information and says, okay, let me get that for you. It's almost like a waiter. A server. You give it an order, which is your YAML file, and then you give it the code from the repo, which is all the special toppings you want, and it puts it all together and gets it to where you need to deploy it. This is also very useful because it means you can deploy your application on multiple platforms. So let's say you have a website and you want it on the internet, you want it mobile, you want it, in all sorts of different places. You might even have a specific application that's separate. Well, this way, your deployment targets can be put into multiple places, and it's all controlled from within Azure Pipelines. It's a very convenient way of doing things. And the reason they call it continuous integration and continuous deployment is because you notice this isn't just a one-way ticket. Okay? Notice the up and down for the code repo. Because you can see the deployment target, and let's say you say, wait, we don't like this feature, or we need it different, or something doesn't look right. You go back to the coder, they push it to the repository, Azure Pipeline gets it to the deployment target. So there's a feedback loop. So you have continuous integration of new code, and then you have continuous deployment to your target. And there doesn't have to be anybody in the middle. There's no IT staff that then have to go back and reconfigure the server, or you're not paying a hosting company to do that for you. You might pay like a web hosting company. You don't even have to do that. This is as simple as this. You just need to have your coders. They just push it to the repository, and Azure Pipelines takes care of the rest. So we're going to do an actual little website. Nothing spectacular, just something so you can see what this looks like. So to start a DevOps project, you're going to go ahead to go to create a resource, and then you're going to choose DevOps, and then DevOps Starter. And you'll notice that they have a lot of different code bases that you can use. .NET, Node.js, I do a lot of work in that. PHP, it's very popular.
Java, Python, obviously, if you're going to do Django or Flask. You can also use this to make IoT applications. So they do offer C for that, so it's smaller, more lightweight. You got Ruby, Go. The one that I'm going to demonstrate in a little bit here is the static website, which is just new HTML, basic CSS, JavaScript type thing. So just for example's sake, I'll do that. And they want me to confirm it. For this example, I went ahead and just did Windows Web App. You can also build it in containers. We'll have to talk about that some other time. But for now, we're just doing a regular Win app. And this is where you would go ahead and fill out your project name, what organization, subscription. You'd name the web application. Now, the name has to be unique compared to what other people have already made in Azure, because it actually does get a URL that you can go to. So that's pretty useful. So you would fill this in, and then you would click Done. But I actually conveniently already had one put together for us. And this is it here. Right, so we were working on the DevOps project. And what I did was I went to the resource home here from my all resources list. And it shows you my pipeline here, the code, the build, and the development. One thing I wanted to show was that this thing, the application actually has a URL that you can go to. And I did open that. And just to show you that it's working, they do give you this convenient placeholder that says success, everything's working, your HTML app is up and running. So I just wanted to show that they do give you a URL that you can use, and you can even use, if you don't have a domain for the site that you're working on, especially during development, you can use that. Okay, so we have our DevOps example application. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the project homepage. And the project homepage, if you go to Overview, it's going to give you, whatever information you've given it. It's going to tell you how the pipelines are going, the builds. But let's go to the repo, the repository, because this is where all the files are nicely kept for you. Now, in an HTML website, the main file is index. And as you can see, this is that placeholder site that I talked about. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually do something you would usually do in a coding environment, and then you would use a command line to post the change. But we're going to go ahead and just, for the sake of speed here, we're going to go ahead and just change this manually here. So we're just going to take all of this body and we're going to delete it. Although we do have to close our HTML tag. Okay. And we're going to change this one. Whoops. We're going to change that to the classic Hello World. And we're going to go ahead and commit this. Commit changed to Hello World. So it's a good idea when you're making commits to go ahead and make a comment. That way your teammates know what the point of the commit was, or if you were really sleepy, you'll know later. So go ahead and commit that. Okay. So then we can go back and we'll see that that was done just now. Yeah, we can see that our commit was made. Now, if we go to pipelines, We'll actually see that this was already pushed. It was already built because if we click here, it was saying that it was a rolling build triggered. So when that commit was made, it automatically rebuilt the website for us. And we can click here on build and it'll show us all the steps it went through. And you can see that it took 13 seconds to build it and it redid everything for us. And when we go now to the site, that holder page is gone, but the title has been changed to Hello World, just as we entered on our HTML. Now, obviously, this is a very simple example, um, but as you can imagine, all those different code bases I showed you, all the different platforms, you can create so many different applications and keep them on a rolling, continuous integration, continuous development cycle. And your developers can just write the code, commit to the repositories, and it all just works. Now, if you don't want to use the Azure repositories that we're seeing here, you can connect, say, your GitHub repository or other private repositories you might have, and you can use those instead. So there's a lot of options, there's a lot of capability.
Next, we're going to talk about identity management. So, the main goal of identity management is to achieve authentication of users, devices, and API attempting to use IT resources. So, I want you to get this idea that we're talking about human users, we're talking about devices, mobile devices, servers, desktops, whatever. But even more importantly, today we're also talking about programming interfaces, APIs, because so many times we have, say, a web application and it's connecting to a whole nother site somewhere over the internet. Or you might have multiple different types of software that you're deploying, and those talk to each other through programming interfaces. And you want to make sure that you're monitoring those and that they have proper access and that you keep out the ones you don't. It's become a huge vector of attack for adversaries, and you want to keep track of that. However, authentication merely proves who they are, but it actually doesn't say they're authorized. Authorization is saying, yes, you do have the ability, we've given you permission to use these resources. It's about permission. So you want to make sure that with identity management, you're making sure that you're authenticating and authorizing, not just one or the other. So the way you do authorization is you manage it using group policies and associated roles. So what does this mean? Basically, what you do is you create a role. Let's say workstation, and that role would apply to any of your desktops, laptops, or anything that a user might be working with. And so you would create a role that would have certain authorizations. So, what software it could use, what printers it could use, what resources it was able to connect to, and you would put those into roles. And what you want to do is you want to group these roles together so that it's easier to apply an entire group of roles to a single account rather than having to, edit each account by itself. It also makes it easier to keep track of who has what authorization and making sure that people only have as much authorization as they need. The same thing goes with devices and APIs. You don't need everything to be a super user, to be an admin. That's a very bad policy. You want to give least access. You always want to give least access. Only give the resources that the user, device, or API actually needs, and nothing more, because that's what's going to protect you when you have a stolen identity. Whether it's a user, a device, an API, if that identity is stolen and an adversary can now attack, you want to make sure that they're only going to be able to hit certain things and that they'll have a limited impact that way. With cloud and dispersed applications and all these devices that are brought in, whether they're company devices or what we call bring your own device, which is like, your smartwatch from home or your phone from home. The perimeter ideal, the ideal that you could build this firewall around all your IT resources and guard it, is gone. You probably read this a million times. The perimeter is gone, you know. But if you think about it, identity is the new perimeter because that's how you control the traffic. You control who gets authorized, what gets authenticated. It's there for you. You can do that with identity management. On Azure, Microsoft provides a software as a service that is known as Azure Active Directory. It's based on the traditional on premise Active Directory, but in reality, it has so many more use cases and has so much more power when it comes to identity management. See, the Active Directory and your domain services that were associated with it were primarily, well, they were on premise. So you were still behind that old perimeter, the old, wall defending your network. You know. So in the world of cloud, in the world of multiple devices, of web applications, on-premise Active Directory fails to provide identity management. And that's why using something cloud-based like Microsoft Azure Active Directory is perfect. Because as you can see in this diagram that I got from the Microsoft documentation, as got some great stuff in there. Microsoft Active Directory gives you connection to your on-premise Active Directory, so you can directly take anything that you do there and apply it to the cloud or vice versa. You can keep the two synced. You have whatever human resources applications, you can control those. Who gets access to what. That's where some of the most private of your information is going to be, so you want to guard them. Any on-premise legacy apps, so anything that you might have that's in-house, it can be fully integrated with the authentication and authorization steps in Active Directory. Here's the big one: cloud hosted applications. Let's say you have things in Google Cloud. Let's say you have things in AWS, Oracle Cloud. Let's say you use software as a service. Okay, let's say you use Salesforce or you use Elastic Cloud or any of these software as a service. One really bad idea is to have multiple accounts that your users have to have usernames and passwords and they have to manage them, because that is going to be a nightmare security wise. It's also going to be a nightmare for the user. Their accessibility is going to go down. It's just, you got to remember your three tiers, your triangle of cybersecurity: confidentiality, integrity, and accessibility. You got to think of the user as well. So what Microsoft Azure Active Directory does is it lets you use what's called single sign-on. What this means is all your user has to do is sign on to Azure Active Directory, preferably using the various multi-factor authentication methods that Microsoft provides some support for. Then, through different tokenized services like OAuth, that same user can access any of these resources that are in this diagram without ever having to log on again. This is good. It means fewer usernames, fewer passwords, fewer possibilities of, the person in the middle, intercepting the traffic, stealing the credential, and getting into any of this. So, and then also from a from a business point of view, you're able to make better group policies. You're able to control better, okay, which departments need access to Salesforce, which departments need access to the HR database. So those group policies and those roles can be made very granular, but all in one place in Microsoft Azure Active Directory. You're not having this problem where it's like, okay, we control these resources here, and here are the roles and groups, and we do these over here. No, it's in one place, easily manageable. And so, without any further discussion, let's get to some hands on look at Azure Directory.
So as we went over, one of the biggest benefits of using Azure for your cloud services is you get Azure Active Directory for identity management. It's a well-tested, well-built system. So the way it works is you have your tenant. So that's whatever organization you happen to be. And a tenant's going to get a tenant ID as well as a primary domain. And then from there, you can create users, you can create guest users, you can create groups so that you put people together where they need to be, or devices. You can register those web applications, and you can actually have their login directly with Azure Directory. So you can control all your logins that way through one source instead of having several different databases. It's very useful. I was talking about role management a little earlier. You can do that from here. So let's just take a look at the different roles. And they have a lot of pre-built roles that you can use to give people the administrative rights that they need, the use cases they need. But remember, you never want to give a user or device a role that they don't require. It's called a principle of least access, and it's very important to follow. So make sure to really fine tune and be very granular when you apply roles. Here we can see applications that are enterprise applications that you can control through here. As you can see, you can have different Microsoft ones. You can actually add your own applications, as I mentioned. Here you could click New Application, and then click an application you're developing, and then you would take it to the registration here. As you can see, I actually have one. It's Office 365 Beat, which is a elastic beat that specifically grabs the logs for Office 365. It's a custom application, but I control its authentication and everything through Active Directory, even though it's not Microsoft. It's a separate application. So very useful for identity management. Pretty straightforward. You have audit logs, you have provisioning logs, so you can pay attention to what's going on. And you could do an entire video just on Azure Directory alone, but this pretty much gives you the layout, and then our previous discussions on identity management give you an idea of how you use these to create those really tight, really granular roles so that users only have the access they need, but they also have easy to use user interface. The single sign-on concept where they just enter their username and password once, use their multi-factor authentication once, and then they can use any application either on premises or in the cloud. Thank you for watching this video of part 2 of Microsoft Azure Fundamentals. This time we went over pricing, calculations, management of cost. We talked about DevOps and the concept of continuous integration and continuous development. We also discussed identity management and Azure Active Directory. Thank you again for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or ideas about where you might want to learn more with Azure or any other topic, please feel free to leave something in the comments. Again, thank you, and we'll see you next time.